Hello and welcome back to Demian Allan Astrology and Tarot channel. Welcome back to a very special video where I'm going to be combining the Bach Flower Remedies with the astrological planets. Yes, you heard it first. Have you ever been in a situation where you've had a really heavy Saturn transit? You know, that Saturn return that didn't go so well? Has Uranus turned your world upside down? Has Neptune flummoxed you and make you feel all at sea? Well, we've all gone through these particular transits, and sometimes we can absorb it and we can take it on an emotional level, on a psychological level. But the flower remedies, the Bach Flower Remedies, allow us to ritualize this energy by taking a Bach Flower Remedy and opening the bottle and just putting 4 drops in some water and sip that throughout the day. Now, this is something that I've used within my own consultations and on myself. And I have to stress, this is just my own opinions and own ideas about which Bach Flower Remedies are assigned to which planetary energy. Now, the first thing I've got to say here is that it's not to become attached to these flower remedies. This is to allow you to become more conscious and aware of the changes that are happening through the planetary transits. We can absorb this energy and it's how we respond. It's not about becoming attached to one idea or one thing. It's about helping us to go through a particular difficult period where we may be experiencing from that planetary energy. So let's get started on the first one. Now, the sun is the first one. Now, we call it a planet. Us astrologers, of course, it's a star. But the sun is about ourself. It's about our individuality. It's about the energy that goes outward from us to the world. Now, if we do not feel confident, then that affects not only us, but the people around us. So confidence is a real key about how we feel about ourselves, that discovery of finding oneself as well. It's a very sun journey. It's the hero's journey in a way. Now, the flower remedy that I like to work with of any aspects to do with the sun. So you might have a planet that's really making a square or opposition to your sun sign that's called a lack of self-confidence or a lack of awareness or a loss of sense of self. Now, I like to work with the flower remedy of larch. This is really good for self-confidence, the ability to be able to feel confident about oneself and one's individuality. And ultimately, if we respond to that energy, then we're going to find it easier. Now, what you do is that you would take a flower remedy like this and you would open it and you would squeeze 4 drops in some water and you would sip that throughout the day when you finished. So larch is really good for anything to do with the sun. If you're feeling not that confident, if you're feeling that, you know, you've got, like, let's say, a Saturn that's squaring your sun, and that could be for a long period of time, then this is a really good one to work with. Okay, let's go on to the next one, shall we? We call this a planet, this next one, the moon, but of course it's a satellite, but we call it a planet as astrologers. And this is the moon. Now, the moon is the fastest moving planet, and it takes about 2.5 days to go through each sign of the zodiac. Now, that's important because the moon rules our unconscious, habitual patterns. You know, I said it rules the first 7 years of our life, so it's very much to do with what we absorb from our environment, our memories from that time, our habits. Where do we feel secure? What makes us feel secure? And of course, the emotional aspect of it. Our emotions change every day to the environment, the people that we're involved in. So the moon has very, very powerful energies. And when, let's say, it's a full moon or a new moon, obviously, you know, it can accentuate and magnify emotions. You know, so a really good one. This is the most popular Bach Flower Remedies, most well known, which is Rescue Remedy, which is 5 flowers come together. It's a really good one. And the reason why is because you may be feeling that moon's energy for a day and a half. So it may be a couple of hours in a day that you just feel, do you know what, I feel really kind of overwhelmed, really emotional, really kind of tired as well. It's probably something to do with the moon. And because it's so fast moving in the zodiac, it could be a day and a half, it could be an hour or two. So Rescue Remedy, I think, is a really good one in just comforting and allowing things to sort of play out and not to become too emotional. Ultimately, it's always about security with the moon, so it's a really good one. Okay, next is going to be Mercury. Now, Mercury is an energy is to do with the mind and how we communicate. So when we've got another planet that's squaring or opposing or touching that Mercury in our natal chart, we can feel overstimulated in the mind. And that can cause us to analyse or overanalyse and get caught up in the mind. So a really good Bach Flower Remedy for working with Mercury's energy, for me, is white chestnut. And the reason is because it allows the mind to quieten down. You know the monkey chatter? Oh yes. This allows it to quieten down so that we're not in this repetitive thoughts here. We're not overstimulated by the mind. And, you know, Mercury ultimately is there in a way for sort of rational thoughts, you know, practical thoughts, problem solving. And if it's overstimulated, let's say Uranus is opposing your natal Mercury, then you're going to feel like flashes of intuition. You're going to feel like your mind is speeding up ahead of you. Then white chestnut is really good for that. Really good for that. Okay, let's go on to the next planet, Venus. Now, Venus's energy, and to me, Venus rules that time from the ages of 14 to 21. And if you look at that kind of group, of teenagers, it's about how they relate to people, social relationships. That's ultimately Venus, and how comfortable do we feel about ourselves, in terms of our body, our appearance. So Venus is really important about, how do we feel about ourselves in terms of how do we come across to other people. So when Venus is being transited by another planet, let's say again by a square or opposition. The squares and oppositions do tend to be the key aspects because they tend to be quite challenging. Then we suddenly look about ourselves and how do we feel about ourselves. So we could be very self-critical, and for anything to do with Venus energy and how one thinks about ourselves, then crab apple is really, really good, really good. And I have to say this, because of technology, because of phones and social media, most people are looking at themselves through a camera. So they're seeing themselves a lot more these days than they would 30 years ago. So we're in this culture at the moment where we're really place how we look and how we present ourselves high up on the list. And if it's in some way negative or we're obsessing over it, then crab apple is really good to work with. It's that old mantra of you need to love yourself before you can love another. You need to appreciate yourself. And there are times when if Venus is activated in your chart, by a difficult other planet, then of course you might be very critical of yourself and very obsessed by yourself. So crab apple's really good. Okay, let's look next. Mars. This one's going to be quite simple, actually. So Mars is the energy that gets us moving. It rules. Where's our courage come from? Where's our ability to get things done, to initiate? But if Mars is being activated by another planet that's in difficult aspect, then we can become really impatient. And that controlled aggression of Mars, that goes out the window. And so really simple, impatience is the Bach Flower Remedy that's really good for working with Mars energy. Really good. Because we need to learn the art of patience. If under a Mars transit is really difficult and really challenging, we're more likely to say something that we later regret or come to really decisions that we haven't thought through, and that can have consequences. So impatience is really good for just looking at that energy of working with Mars in a really practical way and learning to sort of step back a little bit. Really good. I mean, we need Mars, like I always say, sport is a really good way of demonstrating Mars energy, that controlled aggression, that competitiveness, getting things done. So it's really good. Okay, Jupiter's next, and a lot of people say, well, hang on, Jupiter's the great benefactor of the sky. Why would that be a difficult aspect? Well, Jupiter magnifies everything. It makes things a lot bigger. and maybe there's something in your chart that you think, actually, I don't want that to be made bigger or to be accentuated in my chart. So Jupiter's energy sometimes can be very overwhelming, and this is a very Sagittarius Bach Flower Remedy, which is agrimony, that I like to work with Jupiter. Jupiter people are people that say everything's fine. They're laughing, they're the entertainers. They make people laugh, and they're a bit like that clown who goes off and cries in the corner without telling anyone. They need to express themselves and say, do you know what? Things are not all right. Because Jupiter people with a lot of, Jupiter energy in the charts tend to be people who, are very optimistic. And they need to accept that sometimes everything's not all right. And it's okay to say, do you know what? I'm not all right at the moment. And so agrimony actually helps that. Because when you're going through a difficult Jupiter transit, you might think that, I've got to be really cheery. I've got to say to everything, no, things are great. And sometimes, they're not. And it's okay. Okay, now we come to one of the big ones, which is Saturn. I mentioned it earlier. Saturn. What can I say about Saturn? People don't like Saturn transits a lot of the time. They find them really difficult. But the thing about it, it will reward you more than any other planet. But not at the beginning and not in the middle, at the end of the transit. And it takes 29 years to go around the whole of the zodiac. So it spends about 2.5 years in each sign of the zodiac. So you will have a 2.5 year basis of Saturn's energy working through you. So it can be really, really kind of challenging at times. And these are some of the themes that will come out. I feel heavy. I feel responsible for everything. I'm duty bound. I feel limited. No one's giving me a pat on the back saying, well done. I'm just working all the time. These are some of the themes that people will express under a Saturn transit, And, you could be 21 years of age and under a Saturn transit and feel old. It could be any age. It tends to make you feel suddenly very, very old. And one of the things that manifestations of that from an emotional point of view is people can feel a bit deep down, a bit depressed about life, that it doesn't have much joy. So the Bach Flower Remedy I like to work with this one is mustard. Mustard is really good for alleviating those feelings of heaviness, weariness, feeling slightly down. Really, really good one to work with Saturn's energy. Like I said, it's about maturity, Saturn. It's about growing up. It's about seeing the reality of situation. And so Saturn is really good. And, I feel like Saturn gets a bit of a bad rap in astrology. But actually, the older we get, the more comfortable we become with Saturn's energy, So it's when, you're younger that Saturn's energy really kind of bites, Once we get sort of past the ages of the sort of mid-40s, on that Saturn opposing Saturn that everyone gets, people become much more comfortable with Saturn's energy. Okay, now we come to the big three, the outer planets. And the outer planets tend to be more challenging because they're slower moving. So the next one, Uranus, 84 years around the zodiac. So that means it takes 7 years in each sign of the zodiac. So you could be under a Uranus transit for up to 2 years going through it. And the next one is Uranus. And Uranus is the rebel in the pack. It's very disruptive. It brings about self-liberation. It strips away what needs to be stripped away and brings in things that are new. But, human beings don't really like change that often. So when you're going through Uranus transit, it can feel like your world's being turned upside down. You don't know where you are, what's happening, and therefore it disrupts the natural flow. And essentially what it is that you are experiencing change in your lifestyle. Uranus is forcing you to make the changes that are needed. And a great one here to work with is walnut. I have to say that walnut is great for anybody who's going through changes in their life. I mean, you can give Bach Flower Remedies to your children. It's fine. And walnut's a really good one. Your child who's got the first day at school or first day at college or university or first job. This is a really good one for those major changes that are coming through in your life. Walnut is particularly good. It works really well with any Uranus transits that are happening in your chart because you accept the change more readily. So yeah, good for Uranus. Okay, next, Neptune. Now, Uranus is very much external. It tends to be quite external, is that things outside of you happen. With Neptune, it's much more internal, it's much more nebulous, much more difficult, actually, much more subtle. And, you know, under Neptune transits, you can feel very much that you're ungrounded, creatively or spiritually inspired, but not quite with it. And, you know, if you think about some of the themes that Neptune rules, like, you know, vapors and gases and anything to do with escapism, then it can be a very difficult planetary energy to work with on an everyday basis. You know, if you've got to go to work or you've got family and stuff like this, it can be very, very difficult because it's a higher force energy and it's so difficult to grab hold of and go, right, that's it, because it doesn't necessarily come out externally in a situation or a person. It tends to come very much internally of a need to escape or to find a bigger meaning in life. So the Bach Flower remedy that I recommend is clematis for Neptune energy, or going for a transit to do a Neptune. That's a really good one to work with because it just grounds you and centers you, tends to. And when you're working with Neptune energy, that's the one thing that you tend to feel is that it tends to be ungrounded. So yeah, clematis is really good. Okay, final one and the big one, Pluto. Pluto is to do with power a lot. Do you give away your power? Are you too much in a powerful position? But fundamentally, Pluto is about facing one's fears. And it may be fears that you don't want to face. You know, it may be things that you have been kind of pushing aside for many, many years and suddenly comes up to the surface and goes, right, there it is. So Pluto's going to be very difficult, and it's the slowest moving planet. So therefore you can, you know, have up to 3 years of going through a Pluto transit. And it's the ability to have courage to face one's fears and ultimately to understand yourself and others around you in a much deeper way. And that develops the person. So minimalist is really good for facing one's fears. As you can see, I've got a big bottle of this. But yeah, Pluto it's about facing one's fears. It's about overcoming them and have a deeper awareness of yourself and other people and the human experience. So that's really, really good to work with on Pluto transits. Now, let me just say, what you can do with these is you can combine them. So let's say an example would be that, you know, you've got Venus, your natal Venus in your chart, crabapple, and it's been squared by Uranus. So what you would do is you would take 4 drops of each Bach Flower remedy. So you would take it of crabapple for Venus and then walnut for the Uranus. So you can combine. You can even do it into 3 Bach Flower remedies if 3 planets are really being activated in your chart. You could do it on an intuitive basis that you kind of feel. You may not even check your chart, but you know, you might feel, do you know what, I feel very emotional at the moment. So maybe you would go to the rescue remedy. The great thing about working with this is that I think that people from an intellectual level, you know, with astrology and learning about the planets and your own natal chart, you know, that's great. But actually to get a bottle and to open it up and to put those drops in, it's a very physical way of suddenly your attention is drawn to the energy and the emotions and the psychological issues that are going on in that moment. And that really brings about an essence of intensifying, but also accepting what's happening with you. It's a physical manifestation of what's happening to you. It's a physical gesture that you're doing here. Now, you can get these Bach Flower remedies online. Watkins books, which I'm the resident astrologer, does them as well. And they are a fantastic way of working through these energies and understanding the planetary energies within your own chart and what's happening right now and what's coming up. So, look, if you enjoyed that, please press the subscribe button, and I hope you enjoyed that. And I will no doubt see you all soon. So, goodbye for now.